All right, good morning, everyone. And so we will start with making a $1 offering as a token for requesting the teachings, and then Geshe will lead the way with refuge and bodhicitta. So if you know those verses, you're definitely welcome to join in. And if not, then you can just kick back and relax. Sashi Boki Jushimeto Tamri Rablingshi Nidegen Padi Sangye Shindu Mikte Owa Girdrokunamdak Shin La Chupa Shoidam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami. Chondan Sogi Chonnam La Chanchu Badu Dandi Kasuchi Dagi Chushegi Betsonangi Drola Penche Sange Dropasho
Sanji Chedang Zoji Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Dami Kyabsu Dagi Chushi Yebon Zeda Drola Benshi Sanji Drupara Sho Sanji Chedang Zoji Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Dami Kyabsu Yebon Zeda Drola Benshi Sanji Drupara Sho 강기 투진이 손에 따와 당제 밤비처럼 담비춘 된지 고담 제라 창세로 Good morning everyone. 타당한지 산지 초조마 살순 된데지 다 넘버 산지 비축 종공도 자와도디 디차고레스 견수 고만용이 된디가 봐나 가르레슬라운디 슈티 넘버 산지 비축 뚱인디 아니 산지엄 아니 temba shakyamuni kongi temba res tembi ki chö di chö sengi di bigi ani so ngolam ni sech ta dinane ta lam ki tembi ki chö do di lam laba sum set Tsultrim ki laba tengen zingi laba sherib ki laba sum di ngaran su kayo layo ki so su gyuli su lene ani chö chede di tereshas 다들 간르진 제국도 슬라니 그게 디싱이 냠뇨용이 게 아니 깨우 담바티기디 아니 견정군족 세트 차고레스 두수도 두치 두수도 깨지티지 두수산의 람딘시니 아니 산지 이추 제국도 로다디 직진의 짬도세 그래 직진은 종콘로 직진은 로기도 딘디 차고도 왔어
So we started this session with reciting the verse for refuge and bodhicitta 3 times. So it might be that some of you are familiar with it, some of you have not heard about it before. And so for us, this is, you could say, the source of the Dharma of the Buddha Dharma. And so we regard the Buddha the teacher. Buddha Shakyamuni is a teacher, right? So it says, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha. So we regard the Buddha Shakyamuni as the teacher, and the Buddha taught us the Dhamma. And the main Dhamma that the Buddha taught us is concerned with developing true paths and true cessations. But then when we look at the teachings, they teach us the three trainings: training in concentration. Sorry, first of training in ethical discipline, then training in concentration, then training in wisdom. And so as much as we can, we want to take up these teachings in our own continuum. And so we take them up, those three trainings, the paths of the three trainings, and this is what we practice. And so how do we take them up? Well, we rely upon the Sangha jewel. This is the third object of refuge, the Sangha jewel. We receive their instructions with respect to the three trainings as taught by the Buddha. We ask questions, we clarify doubts and so forth. And through that, we become knowledgeable of the ways to put it into practice. And so then again, going back to this verse that we began with, the verse for going for refuge and developing bodhicitta, the verse that we recited 3 times. In some sense, we can say that this is the source of the Buddha Dhamma, but also we can look at it as the narration or the narrative of the Buddha Dhamma, in a sense that this is how we then take it up and put it into practice.
These are the Sanji Chudi Big Yabuj Chetuya, Toma, Sanji Chugendusumlaya, the Ichigoyadi, Ichigoyadi, Be Kishimurosro, Sanji Chugendusumlaya, and the Tonta Parsumlaya, Ichimena, and these song big Lavjalayan, Julia, Lavjal Lalentayadi, Bemasota. Kaburo run, Tinza Ichigo, the Ichi Yongela, and the church Jangoda, the Hardun the Pena, Sangila Ichi Yongela, and it so Sanji gets Sonja Vichu, and it Tinang Letamboe, and the Sanji Kuson to Sunguyon Descendant, Sanji in Zenam La Soba, and it Leven Paola Soba, and the Pangu Paola Drula Soba, Kunzun Zeshavigi. 아니 산지긴 젠남도서 테스트 제투와나 아니 오늘 이원 쳐봐 수시 라마메바 쳐드래 아니 산지긴 제바틴지 요러스라 어두소지 제바나 아니 시니 산지 송래야 도나 용야지 산지 송래야 도나 제투와나 강송 샤본 통디 아니 비기다 이치 맞지랑지 그 Demba Denja, Muyunesu, Pensam Koranton Sonjayanza, Adi Sanji Chile, Iche Yonch, Yungresra.
Kadi Lubun Tayanta, Ludub,
Levin Power,
Pautan Tayan Chiparwa,
Ria,
Ani somebody?
Ludub, Gobuludub,
And so, to practice well the teachings of the Buddha Dhamma, we first of all need to study the Buddha Dhamma, to study the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. This is crucial. And so we need to first of all begin with studying what they are, studying what the Buddha is, because we need to develop trust in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Without developing trust, it would be very difficult to put it into practice, to put the teachings of the Buddha into practice. And therefore, trust is definitely needed. And so to develop trust in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, particularly to develop trust in the Buddha, we begin our study. So we study, for example, about the qualities of body, speech, and mind of the Buddha, or we can read accounts of the deeds of the Buddha, the life stories of the Buddha. So there are texts that explain the activities, or that recount the activities, or the biographies of the Buddha. So some texts were composed by Aryasura. Some texts were composed by Nagarjuna. So if we read those texts and the accounts of the life story of the Buddha, Geshe will find that captivating, inspiring, so that through that, some interest in the Buddha Dharma can also be ignited. And through that process, also trust can arise.
대다 아 이체면은 로 이체면은 산지래 이체면은 아 산지 송샤와디 라글렌 딸모도 야시야다와레스로 만주기 지 라글렌 가주스터 투구 예메디 조 산지래 대버선는다 이체들엔도스로 이체 매바이나 비기 치 남줄래 가리 인도도 체대바이나야 산지 송샤와 대다 아니 가왔다가 쳤는 로데지 용거로 빼나 지 라브드 총와이나야 아 오늘 샘딩기 산지래야 이제면은 아니 비게 산지 만나샤비게 라브종고 동바 로 셴라 네버 시던 찌버 동비게 동바디 냠가시는 쪽으로 왔으라 셴라 네버 시던 찌버 뽕슬라오니 셴라야 네스 참무장야 지금에서 담자여라다 로 아니 셴기 샘컴라 포비 게제시야 남주 땡라 소바 싸와니는 잼투메와이나 디께 간을 하르슬디 아니 산길에 이치 야부지 매반자 디진 레거다 로 나로 투바자데라 소바 사말로 아니 지 간지 산길에 이치 야부지 레마투기 아니 겐기 디용고여레스 딘자 뒤따도 되는비 아니 겸로 야부사 산지 고순투 송비 연된투서 양양 사미한테서 빼 마스바 계신 인사리스
Without first of trusting in the Buddha, we will be disinclined to some degree to put it into practice. So the Buddha gave teachings, explain what it is that we need to put into practice, and really without trusting the Buddha, without having faith or trust in the Buddha as the teacher, it would be difficult to put them into practice as the Buddha taught. And so if we lack this portion of faith or trust in the Buddha and the teachings of the Buddha, externally we might be putting up a show, pretending to be practicing or to be taking up some teachings or practices, but then internally or in terms of the way that we behave will contradict the teachings of the Buddha, will act in contradiction to what the Buddha said. And so really, when we look at trust or belief or faith in the teachings of the Buddha, this is really crucial. Like, for example, when you think about the monastic codes laid out for monks and nuns, without trusting the Buddha, without having a sense of faith, then we will be able to abstain from harming others and the basis of that harm when we take upon ourselves such vows. And so, without really trusting the Buddha and the teachings of the Buddha, will not properly guard such vows of abstaining harm at the basis of that harm. And so when we take upon ourselves such vows, then we seek to abstain from even a subtle level of harm that we inflict upon others. And we can do that in a variety of ways. It could be either using a speech that is offensive, or body language might be offensive or threatening or what have you. So without really trusting the Buddha and the teachings of the Buddha, it can lead to such behavior that is harmful to others, right? So in the vows that we have as monastics, we seek to abstain from harming others as a basis and the base of that harm. And without trusting the Buddha and the teachings, it might be either that we use in a way that we speak in a way that is offensive to others, that we behave in a way that is offensive to others, that we create a sense of discord with our surrounding, give rise to arguments, divisions, and so forth. Such things can happen to us without a sense of trust in the teachings, of the Buddha and the Buddha. And so, because of that, it's important for us to still continue to reflect upon refuge, to reflect upon the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. This is very important to us.
어디래 딘자 다 상기기 추송디게 비기다 미유로디 아니 디기 주야식 쳇다 동아세약 쳇 디송레스라 다디 섬전 탐절이야 라 참말이야 고야식 라 디기 주야기 탑다 동아세약 탑 무궁이지 연하다 쳇 샤즈는 지금도 왔다 디 고기였나 니버다 아니 상기기 쳇 최고야 로직 자기도 쓰라
And so the Buddha taught the Dhamma, and the objective of the teachings that the Buddha gave is to cultivate the happiness and well-being that we seek, and to eliminate the suffering that we do not wish for. And in fact, when we not only look at ourselves, but when we consider all living beings, all sentient beings, we can recognize that all living beings, all sentient beings, are seeking happiness and well-being and wanting to avoid pain, suffering. And therefore, in some sense, you can say that therefore there is no one that doesn't need to put it into practice in order to accomplish happiness and well-being. And therefore, for that reason, then for us, we need to practice the Dhamma.
그게 전부 뒤에 경험을 주는 데서 그런 깜빡 나듯이고
If you have pain in your knees, and you can also drag one of the sofas and just kind of chill out and be really comfortable.
어디래 다 간다시 로 디에드야기 탑다 동아세야기 탑 간다시 로그도슬라디 디키 싸워디 로 무슨 비토니 아니 데워드야다 동아세야기 탑 댄샤고치 디어레스 로 상직 송나 디어다.
And so since we recognize that we seek happiness and well-being, we want to avoid suffering and pain, then we need to recognize what the root of happiness is. In recognizing what the root of happiness is, we would be able to cultivate happiness and well-being and to eliminate suffering and pain. And this is what the Buddha, the essence of the teachings of the Buddha, the essence of the Buddha Dhamma, this is what it is.
Reda pena dungar gtsawadi ngunzin tugni dipachi kaathuwana ani devar digi ngangi yongyachi ro ngangi yongjrendo the dungar gtsawa ngunzin ondige the yamsembu beoresra dering onzogi big lojoni miose samrodi 이 내가 될 투데샤스로 동할 자와 가르레스라 온디 나는 속이 나우 냠비기 비 나저라 나디 숙심부 쉬우지 아니 진데바이나 아니 참만지 참 안될된 일리도스 로 나우 냠비기 나디 약고 문진 제투바이나 되니 가서 따지 가겐데다 마선나 망부 쉬우지 아니 디니 세드야지 로 디니 세드야지 그 디송고도스로
And so if we recognize what the root of suffering is, and also will develop the way we develop the technique for putting a stop, ceasing the root of suffering, happiness will naturally arise. This is actually quite incredible. And so when we look at the part of the teachings that we've been covering on the Sunday morning sessions, and this is what we're going to cover today, in Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, we're now looking at a section that explains how to put a stop to that strong sense of self that we have. So now when we think of what the root of suffering is, recognizing the root of suffering, well, according to these teachings, it is that strong grasping at a sense of self. All problems, all difficulties for us arise from that strong grasping at I, at me. And if we recognize it and then be able to stop it, we'll be able to clear it away. Also, we'll be able to clear away many forms of adversities.
데르다 디톤 송고르다로 페나 나 라운디 ngas laondi ani chi pi ta dogdo roch ani rawang wa roch sulaya madeba ra sulaya madembi ani 소소라니 여바치 로레야 차르치니 차바난시 직비 애니 셈레야 손이라 두스려온데 애니 ngalne so ngala yabu chigmundu ngala namgi yabu tengmundu sela so 참말로 nga생인디 비기 남규 애니 게 아니 파쇼 마딜리 술드페 아니 라와 쇼지 여바치 차온디 아니 ngala chigmundu ngal니 chigmundu 세 samlo di gasha gyatan ba ani ngal thonjong chigdu pe ngal chiglaud samsomgi di shuj lego sares di shuj le ondi ani magibat sama din le warda chabaki ya dan konro saya da chig en jan samdan chagdo da sama din le ondi da dini da magiba shuj chado wores.
And so, for instance, when we look at that sense of I that arises in our mind, we can recognize that when the sense of I or me appears to our mind, it appears as if there is a lump of something, a concrete sense of self. And that lump, that concrete sense of I or me that arises in our mind, appears as if it is independent, as if it is not reliant upon anything else, as if it exists in and of itself. This is the sense of I or me that arises in our mind, particularly when certain situations arise and we grasp at that sense of self as if we exist independently in and of ourselves, unreliant upon others, with a concrete sense of self. When we are affected by situations where, for example, we think that that person has said such and such thing to me, they've done this negative thing to me, they've treated me badly, they've insulted me, are looking down on me. So when we are affected by those situations with a strong sense of self, we can see how our mind is made so unhappy. With that grasping at the sense of self as if I exist in and of myself, independently, unreliant upon others, anger and attachment and jealousy and pride and competitiveness, all such states of mind arise, and they're making us so unhappy.
Tirada dinji gidanga nganzi shuk cheta sonara nganzi shuk cheta sondigi ani nyeje mambushi tong de yachi ra de tong digi ani ta ro sosul ngoni gi nyeje mambushi chi yasajila ta dende yo marada di samlo diki ingo sares ra je kawal droba inaya kaisna ani pi ngau nyambi nganzi shuk cheta ondi 아니 생각하리 제바디 아니 소소랑에다 지 만삼 바지다 만템 바지다 지 소소래야 지 뉴에 비소르지 어딘지 지 싸움 다운디 아니 다디 베나 데사지레이나 다 데니 조마라 와서 데니 카발 조와이나야 지금 지기한 레비르 마도 아니 수수 비기 난지 슉 쳔보도 마도 바도 카발 조나야 마데바치 마데바지 레그레스 페나 짝도도도치 페나 짝도도 리리리장디 가왈 샤나야 코 데그마로 가서 코 도도로 디나시 나드 도도도 상보다 상보다 켄 드려야나 가왈이나 만장이 차도스레스.
And to the degree that we grasp at ourselves as if we exist in and of ourselves independently, when that grasping at ourselves becomes so strong, we start to see everything around us as being detrimental to us. So since we then see things as being detrimental to us, we do not wish to stay or remain in a particular place. And we think that if I just go somewhere else, if I do something else, then I'll be able to avoid that. But still, if wherever we go, wherever we stay, if we remain with that strong sense of I or me, that appears to our mind as if we exist independently in and of ourselves in an unreliant way, wherever we go, whatever we do, things will continue to be not right for us, not good enough. We'll still remain dissatisfied, and we'll still see things around us, many things around us, as being detrimental or harmful to us. And again, we'll not wish to stay or to remain in a particular place. So wherever we go, we will still go with that strong sense of I, trusting or grasping at an independently existing I. So it is like a lump of something that appears in our mind. In some sense, we can say that it is like a ball made of iron or metal. You know, kind of if you just dropping somewhere, it's not going to remain where it is. It's going to roll around. So similarly, with that strong sense of I that arises in our mind, like a lump of something, a concrete sense of self, it will not, no, our mind will not be able to remain in a stable or in a stable or solid way. Will always be moved by it, pulled into different directions, with a degree of unhappiness that will accompany us.
That the country never so good said, that the ditching you on down to it, the never so to wena, and a cowl and dronaya, taddy wood and Dewich Jungan, that the never country so good said. Tirta, Ranganzu Yora, the Chakbushu Yora, that the never tas never so was lavana. So in so to Marada. Mensana sotu mari kabyana sotu mari pigi shakchina sotu mutu jachi jatambari taro mensan kabdulia tembaru tor jirado sombana di tamada leungres ro tirda tinza dati di kantas meba sogors la di yonya kora samlo tansho ji toni lebare mato shemba kamaris tinza samlo tansho ji toni dadi meba sogu duse tabdida sanjik songudo daro.
So how do we eliminate that strong sense of self that arises in our mind? Well, first of all, if we do eliminate it, if we'd be able to eliminate it, things will work out for us in a sense that wherever we are and whatever we do, our mind will still feel comfortable and at ease. It will feel well. And so, can it be eliminated? Is it so simple to eliminate that strong sense of self, grasping at ourself as we exist independently in and of ourselves? Can it be eliminated if we take medication, or if we get the needle, an injection? Can we have an operation to remove that strong sense of self that arises in our mind? Of course, it's not that simple. It's not that strong sense of self, grasping ourselves to exist in and of ourselves, can be eliminated that easily. To eliminate it, we need to develop a certain way of thinking, as this section of the text now explains, and this way of thinking was taught to us by the Buddha.
Some the Karasandi, Pigita, Nga Ramawach, Ra, Ramawach, the Ganzala, the Ngala Ramangutus, Ra, Ngala Ramangutus, the Ramang Chicken Road, lower the only Ngala, Ngadi, Ramang Tuba Veslana, Ngadi Ramang Tuba Maris. Ngadi pigi ani Judan Kiana Soba, Kanji, and turn the Trushavach. Then the Trushavach Mato Koran Rawang Trubach Mares. The Koran Rawang Trubach Mina Rawang Trubach Mina, Tamboni Shaman Jimbana, tell a Rawan Kandastego, that J. Omar, the Inang Seminary, I'll Rawan go to some rich. Dindijuras, that is Lotus than Ganda Chinra. Ganda Lo Mambuch, some Lo Mambuch, Sam Leondi, and Sam True Grace, Sungudara.
And so we think, I want to be independent. And the word that we use in Tibetan for being independent is is similar to I want to be free, right? So I want to be free. I want to have independence. I want to have my own power. But when we think of the way that we exist, do we exist in that way? Do we exist in a way that is independent? Do we wield power on our own existence? We do not exist independently. We do not exist like that at all, but we exist in dependence upon many other factors, such as causes and conditions. This is the way that we're established, and depends upon causes and conditions and other factors. And therefore, we do not exist independently through our own power, but solely depending upon others. And still, we grasp on to that sense of independency. We wish to have that sense of independency or own control, even though from our very existence, we depend upon others. And failing to recognize that, still holding on to that sense of independency, we run into problems, into conflicts. So our mind is made confused or disturbed, distressed, because we still try to assert that form of independence, having our own control, our own power, whereas we exist on independence upon others.
Terda nganzula goya rang goya mambu shuchi the yordane the yoya koremdo astra yoya koremada kansna nganzo chiagi manchiagi rang gogoda rang raya koreo madasra pi ngoni chiwa maybe ani chiwi rang toya kiwi rang toya gi tikona ani toma ngati ngun zinche to go dasra teni tai kewala rang yo mari chiwala rang yo mari ani ge de mari gewala ge doyala ya rang yo mari ro ta ganji to rang chi me thajure dasra tinza ani nga rang go dos lapsach me shambala ya shambala lapsach yo mar so la ya rang yo marta tit susu ne lu do jre di is chi ha ko wa na ro sem ding ki ti so ji ga ba na ani gar chong ba na ya ko ani korang ne lu do chung ye do se tin ji re a sam chong gar chong ba na ya sem na la ya ani dang de len tu ga do chi ro sem na dang de len tu ba na ya lam na da du lam na da chi ba cha ga semla thandle ma tu di chinjun jila ban pokbu shu semla pokbu shu ma ki ba cha re kontro sa re ini cha gora da ro
And so we want to have our own freedom or independence, our own self-power in so many different ways. We want it so much, and still we can, when we recognize our relationships of dependency, we can see how it is impossible to have that sense of independency that we are so strongly wishing for. And so when we think of how we have no freedom, no independence in our life, we can think about it first of all in relation to death. Although we wish not to die, we have no control over death. We have no freedom. Although, so when we look at birth and death, we can see that we have no control, no power over those states, and still we go through them. And so to gain control over those states, first off, we need to recognize how we exist in an actual sense. We need to recognize who we are in reality in order to gain control over birth and death, that control that we lack at the moment. And so having no freedom, we die. Having no freedom, we are born again. Having no freedom, we age, although we do not wish to age. So we have no freedom, no control. This is a state of being. And when we recognize it in a really deep way, we can say in a heartfelt way, if you recognize that this is my state, this is who I am, this is how I exist, this is the way of being for me, we will be able to deal way better with whatever occurs to us, be it good or bad. We will be able to take it up. We'll be able to accept or take on what we experience without giving rise to a mind that is distressed about it, unhappy about it, angry about it, and so forth.
terda nganzula ya 고급지 여버디 라왕 고급지 여버디 삼로 땅에들레스 디 삼로 약 땅에디 더 소소라야 라완지 숙한기 총마트겠지 숙한기 총마트 소소 삼로 땅에저라 어디래 디 디하고 땅바이나 디하고 디미수치기 총투마다 니 삼로 가르 땅바디 숙한기 총투 말았어 these are the yaguch people can't cut about so some of the yaxajlia tanya tabshi di kokobri di suzula rama yores the di matang by na shambang kari chede by na tabshi make ro and kegana chi dunga khanda ji by na ya tang 좀 코알이 깨차래 깨차베질 치고다 디 요사다 트사다 지 고고 땅스 지 요 말았어 요 말았어
And so if there is an opportunity for us to gain independence, it would be through developing a certain way of thinking. And if we develop that way of thinking, no one would be able to take it away from us. Right? So a certain way of thinking is something that others will not be able to rob, to take away from us. And so our freedom would be afforded by developing a certain way of thinking, particularly with respect to how we exist in an actual sense. And so there is no other way to gain freedom over birth, sickness, aging, and death other than to undo those states through a certain way of thinking. This is how it works for us in samsara when we go through birth, sickness, aging, and death. We cannot deceive, we cannot lie, we cannot create a certain deception to deceive samsara. The only way to undo it is to, in our mind, develop a way of thinking that will then lead to freedom from those states.
다들 다삼로 라고 여디기 다삼로 디 변의 약시 존나 아니 셴려야 참바곰이야 인지곰이야 장지구 셈곰이야 생기 용된곰이야로 써봐 딘디 제토바나다 아니 the love change love change the D P Kyun Tonde the QT Yonden Congress Kalikaboda that car Congress Sosorani so the any P now Yambi not Jumason saying Nati any Kawali me Zeju Chin some Lutan Devana that the pen Cheshu Chagos is pen Toshu And
so of the best ways to gain that freedom is to cultivate loving kindness and compassion, bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, to look for the qualities of others, to consider the qualities of others. So those methods are so powerful, so effective. And yet it's difficult because we see faults in others. And when we see faults in others, it is very difficult to train our mind to develop an appreciation for the good qualities. And so how do we go about it to train our mind in being able to recognize such good qualities? Well, if we diminish that strong sense of I, self that arises in our mind, we'd be able to do it better. And so we start to investigate the sense of self that arises in our mind. We investigate what is I, what is me. And if we look at what I or me is in an actual sense, using this kind of reflection that this text is explaining, it would be really helpful in terms of diminishing that strong sense of independent self. And that will also have a very effective contribution to developing other positive states of mind.
That did that some down Ngalaya Zeju Chetandi on the Shon Koran the Jernero and the telling something there and other. Rangilunis that journey showing this Rangilun Levin Dawatabi Shabki Shangani Jupar said Omanjura Nanzil Hinki Million Pombo Imbar. Our cartings now Yam the Lokesagi P Nadi rangi phungbo di nga imba di rikpik ton da ani omanjigwe tsawale ya kayores jabar tene tagbi da migo sombe tela nga onyembi lo jimin kewa goshins titse tikigyo mara ponso la nga onyembi lo jimin migiye nga onyembi lo ten megewa rangi nyole pebi se salshin kanza ni kewa pme pakpa soji kobo dan tarwa boso dashin phungbo la tenne tagba yinla tagba yinla tadima loksa kisarde tagba yinla phungbu gyun tsokba dan tsokba jin gyun dan gyun ji kanya kanza mayin de pena shinda lola mangona moda droch yanla phanglo sola tenne tagba yinji ti yanla rerewa dan tsokba kanya shinda mayin ba shendi dole chedari yanla somnam la tenne shinda jobashin tejin phungbo nam tenne kunzu sumje sheju shesos.
And so in order to investigate the way that I exist in an actual sense, going back to mind training like the rays of the sun, we're going to pick up on the section that explains how to reflect upon the self, the I, from the perspective of our own system. Geshe, what page number are we on? 122. So for those of you who are using the book form, it's in page 122. And so our own system comes from the words of the Master Chandakirti, who is in his supplement to the Middle Way, thoroughly rejects the premise that the focal object of the innate conception of I is the aggregates, which means that the focal object of our innate grasping at I and me, the focal object are not the body and mind, they are not the aggregates. In his commentary to the supplement, by saying that the imputed self is the focal object, he implies that the thought of an I must arise naturally in relation to it. And with regards to such things as the aggregates, the body and the mental aggregates, the thought of mind naturally arises, never the thought of I. Since we reject the aggregates as being the self, only the thought of mind can arise in relation to them. The thought of I cannot do so because it arises as an imputation and depends on the aggregates. This will become clear when we examine our own experience. Every person, whether a man or woman, an exalted or ordinary individual within cyclic existence or liberated from it, is designated in depends upon the aggregates, the body and mind, which form the basis of designation. In this regard, neither the continuity of the assembly of the aggregates, nor the assembly, nor the parts of the assembly, nor the continuity itself, not even the one to whom that belongs, are the person. Take the example of a chariot, or rather than thinking of a chariot, we can think of a car, right? So take the example of a car. It is designated in depends upon its various parts, such as the wheels. None of its individual parts, the wheels, the steering wheels, and so forth, nor the collection of the parts, is the car itself. Likewise, it is said in a sutra, just as we speak of a chariot or a car dependent on the collection of parts, so we speak of a sentient being conventionally it depends on its aggregates, the body and mind.
Tadi 전자 가르라고 그랬을라느라 nga sedi yomarslago martasro di nganzuyan semjikshagodo nga sedi yomar sedi kosno go tambni gejedu chomekyosono chayak nyengado asro nga singdi yomarslago maras nga di yotsu kandajires nga yotsu teda nga onyambi logi tatsu nimboti 튕구문도스 라 오늘 지난 nga onyambi lodi 아니 nga yotsuldi dan tumbachi te tubayna ani 비 라왕 도도 술래야 마대바 지 여대바 삼로 디 연구문도스 그러 딘 연구문들라고 딘 연구문도스 딘 연구 여바이나 도도의 칼런도스 그러 도도의 칼런도스 비 셀니 비 아니 zugutsuni ni gogodos tero kaza ni gosa jilya ni gogodo di mendus di zan tungu mundula warda
And so what is the meaning of this section? Well, first off, the meaning of this section is not to deny our existence. It's not that we say that I do not exist at all. Of course we exist. If this section would have said that we do not exist at all, maybe there would be no point in actually studying all of this. There would be no we wouldn't find those teachings that deny our existence to be inspiring at all. And so it is not saying that we do not exist at all. What this section is saying is that the way that we appear to our mind and the way that we exist in actuality are different. So there is a disparity between the mode of existence and the mode of appearance. So how do we appear to our mind? We have this strong sense of self that appears to our mind as if there is a concrete sense of self, a lump of something that is me. As if that lump of something that is me, that strong sense of self, a concrete sense of self, that is an independent in and of itself, existing in and of itself, me. And so when we consider the way that we exist in an actual sense, whether we exist in a way that I or me appears to our mind, in that concrete sense of self, we find that I or me doesn't exist in that independent way in and of itself. I exist in a different way, in dependence upon others. And so if I do exist as a concrete I, as a lump of something that is me, I should be able to find it, to point my finger at it, if I look for it where it should be. And so I look for it within, for example, the body and mind. If a solid, concrete I exists as a lump of something, I should find it where it should be. But upon looking for it, we cannot find it.
your mother welcome and 부모 간서 로드 그로선스 어디다 받은 데를 내대기지 도나치 되겠지 레스
So Geshe knows Shannon for probably 7 years, so Shannon has been coming here for 7 years, as much as she can, doing her studies. That's excellent.
7, 8. 14, oh,
14.
sorry. Oh, 8 years.
Yeah. So you've been here, you've been coming for 14 years, but Geshe knows you for 8 years, right? Yeah. From 2014.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. 직벌엔도.
Yeah.
그래서 ler니치는 레디고레스 뭐 동안치. 아니 간지 이제 아니 가진의 코스 디 캐런델 페바 가수유스.
Yeah, so around 2014, that's also the year that Geshe came here to Australia and the center. So roughly speaking, the same amount of time. So Geshe heard that your mom is around. So hi, mom.
그냥 아주 missing in the 아니 삼번남다 지겨라다 간저다 겐데 게투 차가러 왔어. 그래. 겐데 게투 차디 게갱응원이 게투 델이야. 지 오늘 삼번남다 도트 메비 대바여메디 아니 고츠투고 그랬지. 진짜 아니 냐하고 예스. 아니 하고 있으라.
And so all the time, kind of we form, when we engage with each other, we form connections and relationship with each other. Like, for example, Geshe here is been here as a teacher, so we also form those connections, relations of a teacher and a student. Then you're able to, over time, to really assess who has a genuine approach, who has that pure and honest and genuine approach. You can see that.
어디다 딘자다 디나올라야 나오냐비 로행기디기 아니 믹서게 풍부디 나임바 자유가도슬라디기 디기 가르고거슬라디 나디 피 나요출디 요사디 ጼ네 나지 요거나 풍부디 때네 이고도스 디니 마임바디 아니 리그베가선도스 리그베가용도스 뭐요 네츠톤 가용도스.
And so the point here, going back to the text, we have an innate sense of I that arises in our mind, and it arises in our mind with a sense of a concrete, solid sense of self. And so the question is, what is the object of observation of that concrete sense of self? If the innate grasping at I or me is observing the aggregates, which means the body or mind, if it is observing the aggregates, and it depends upon that, there is a concrete, solid sense of self that arises in our mind. If we look for that I, we should find it in the aggregates, in the body and mind. But then reason, if we use reasons, we will refute reasons and logic. We will refute that it is possible to find a concrete, solid sense of self within the body and mind.
Terda tijidigita shamba khala yungres ra khala yorese kaya mevachikliya mevachikliya din zimbayna tat logbara ta din jiyo mara diu siondi ani zawani ne zutu sach nga wonyambi lolaya chawana shingi nga ani rawa dogdowa mevadi sibu shujinta ratregwarata tinjiga rat chesendo tandang nga wonyambi ani ngaje kiedevana di midi minamju chenji chagyo marazra ngone china minamju chenji chagyo maradara.
And so when we think of the sense of self that arises in our mind with such a concrete and solid sense of self, when we look for it and we see that it cannot be found at all, in that sense, we then conclude that it cannot be found, and therefore a solid, a concrete self doesn't exist, an independent sense of self doesn't exist. We will then also see that it is not right, it is not correct to continue to hold on to grasp it, that solid sense of self. So if we look for an independent I, independent me, a concrete, solid lump that is me, if we look for it within the body, within the mind, within the aggregates, we will not be able to find it. It will be clear to us that this solid, concrete sense of self, this I, cannot be found within the aggregates. And that being the case, if we continue then to grasp it ourselves as if we are independent, if we are so solid and concrete with that sense of pride, it will not be right. It will not be kind of the smart way to continue to hold on to that concrete, independent, solid sense of self if we come to see through reasons that a solid sense of self cannot be found.
어디다 드니 비기다 주주사지 매바디 박취 여번이 소수 용요 쪽으로다 라 마기바 용야 기부 처야라 소바 아니 용이 쪽으로다 딩이 빨아라다 간다지요 간다지는 요레스다 요술 간다지레스야 데디다 간네 차고르스 냉가지 차고르다 데로 다디 인규 삼루다 땅치니로 삼루 십사고 땅원디 간삼질이야 요술디 용의 주야지 차고서레스 다디 아니 배준 쇼치고다로 삼루 쇼치 땅치니로 제고거렸다. 되니다 삼 딘지 용의 마주 콘라야다 베이톤이다 셰데야지마도 문도 와서로 몰람다고 규마다고 작찼다고 레셀라 소보. 그러 딘지지레스다.
And so looking for a solid, concrete I or me, in the way that it appears to our mind, we will come to see that we will not find anything. We cannot point at it. It cannot be found. But still, when we look at our experience, we do have a sense of self that exists through our experience, where a mind is made unhappy, or it is offended, it is hurt in a certain situation. So I exist, but still not in a way that it appears to my mind. So how do I exist in an actual sense? Well, this is a difficult point to, first of all, we can establish that I do not exist in a way that I appear to my mind, because I appear to my mind to be solid, independent, concrete, a lump of something that is I or me. But if I look for it, I cannot find it, cannot point my finger at it, but I still exist. So how do I exist? Well, it's a difficult point. It's a complicated topic to explain the way that we exist in an actual way, or to explain it in a precise and very deep way. So we need to think about it. We still continue to think about it. So we can think about it in relation to the experience that we develop with respect to the way that we exist. And there are analogies that are used in order to explain that experience, but it's hard to convey that sense of existence only through analogies or only through words. It is something that at the end we need to learn to experience, which means that the sense of self that we need to experience is the sense of self that exists actually in reality, that is understood after we have negated a concrete and solid sense of self. And so in scripture, it is said that we exist like, so the mode of existence of the self is like a dream, like an echo, like a mirage, and so forth. So those analogies go a certain way in explaining the way that we exist, but at the end, we'll have to really establish that through thinking about it thoroughly and then establishing it through our experience.
Reda pena 작차디로 깨파기압니 아니 수 작찰래야마도 아니 깨 마게바 수 작찰래야죠 마라 디소르지 민파따니 아니 나오냐바티 나티 차르고야 소바 아니 멜롱라 파디는 중니 수샤야지마도 파마드나 비 멜롱 코랑 원수 중니 샤야스키요 마라 딘지 소르지니 아니 나티 ngati yores ngati yosul di tindi chitoni yores.
And so it is said that the way that I exist is like an error, like a reflection in a mirror and so forth. So for an echo, like an echo, for example. So if you stand in a place that can produce an echo, you speak and then the echo comes back at you. So you will not hear an echo without speaking, without saying something. So similarly, I do not exist without being posited through names, without being merely imputed by name. There is no I. Or we can think about a reflection of our face in a mirror. Without looking at the mirror in that sense, without presenting a face to the mirror, there would be no reflection of face in the mirror. So the reflection of face in the mirror exists independent upon presenting a face to the mirror. And so when we think of such analogies and what they mean, it means that the way that I exist is in being merely imputed independence upon something, independence upon a certain basis.
초직니 규마다우스라라 규마다우스란디 아주 자우피어다 규마다우스에 เป็น텐산로지 난 삼수 사운드는 아주기 사침부 슈체데 앞에나 빼샤도지 말다 사침부 슈체거다 그 규마나시 비기 그 텐산로는 빼샤 미금 통할 거래요 말다 로 너무 직전번 이전번 뉴스전번 자 요마 피라 안단지 파스 단치니 미 강갈로 디기 라 숭년도 디기 온디 주스너로 로다스 더 길다 캔서 비어다 배 캔서.
Another way to think about it is the I exists like an illusion. And this is also something that is really interesting, particularly when we think of the way that the world works at the moment, like, for example, money. How we, as human beings, we ascribe certain value to things. So now when we use money, we don't have to see actual notes or coins and so forth, and yet we ascribe a certain value to them. So $1, $2, 50 cents, 20 cents, and so forth. And sometimes what we see is just transactions. We see numbers and we ascribe a certain value to them without actually seeing money. So Geshe kind of sometimes thinks about it, again, in relation to how things exist like illusions. So our mind decides upon something, and thereby it comes into existence and functions.
분위치기 안란 서지 안가서간가 디 춘나디 왕기 육축 샤워다 안지 애니 쇼키 니 gonda part 티와 소샤디 그게 안란지 기체도지 근데 차유다서라 something about 딜로지 레다서라.
And so when we think of money, those numbers, someone or people make up those numbers, which for us means money, and we chase after that from morning to evening after such mistaken appearances. It's quite incredible when you think about it.
dinza dinalaya disora kansan jotsun ditawanis kansan jotsun ditawani mubite konani nyutu tobi tabsangbutis 오늘은 다들 tal에 상을 담아나 당원에게 피기 유딘이 줘봐야지 매바디 무비 내루기 바디 또 특사로 와서 탑상부티스 수근의 남긴 파티 추콘라티 아니 링라차오스.
Such a technique for determining the selfness of person, the text says, is one of the best methods for cognizing the reality of things quickly. So this is one of the best methods for realizing that there is no objective existence, that things do not exist in the object itself. The same reasoning should be applied to all phenomena from form up to the omniscient mind. This is how things exist. This is reality. Nothing has an objective existence. In order to determine such a way that there is no inherent existing person, actually, before we continue with that, the last thing that Geshe said, the same reasoning should be applied to all phenomena from form up to the omniscient mind. Niso.
당분에 남의 있다와 줄을 기비치 직 두드소 제유 마미바다 땡지 땡지소 간다 마미비 땡지 겸에발라 땡이 기비 통머를 랑귤을 따디 간사기 당들 힌기기 진루 웅어선바 내체디 하르시 선도스.
And so the text says next, in order to determine in such a way that there is no inherently existent person, we establish that there is no inherently existing I, and then that there is no inherently existing mind. Firstly, when we generate the view of the selflessness in our mental continuums, due to the faultless logical reasoning of being free from being inherently one or many, the connected object truly existent is not observed, and through the reasoning of dependent arising, the opposite of true existence is observed. Having examined our own continuum to begin with, the vital point is to recognize how the innate misconception of self of persons conceives its object. This has already been explained.
단지는 리버 몽부 슈치 여다드조 간지 슈데나 고뇨 차도 그랬어. 걔는 고뇨도 그랬어.
And so to explain the way to conduct this analysis investigation is complicated. So this is what the next section in the text explains, and Geshe reckons that it would be for some of you a head wreck. It's really complicated, so it could be a head wreck.
얘네 걔는 장도 딘리 장바이나 배에 갈서다 인사오라 더 인사오 쉬었다 원이 상당자요 and 비기다 아니 균생 장 시온디 원이 딘지 토는다 산이 좀 된들이야 된 대법 박도 매봐 대법 독도 매봐서 연구도 하다 디용거라로.
So it can give you a head wreck, but if you study this, it can also become very interesting. It gives you quite a lot to think about, and the way of thinking is very rational. So we think of a variety of reasons that prove particular things. So we develop a rational way of thinking, and through that, we can also develop faith, unshakable faith in the teachings of the Buddha.
다들이 들 제금도 조금 체준이레스. 제금디 아니 균생 지당 쇼는마 균생 장샤 유투조 균생 끄니 아니 균생티 태근도다 문도 돈에 소수 남쪽 돈에 제바체데 제금레스. 다 비기 제비기 된 비기다 지 연구라다 된질이야 샘 때네 돼야들이야 조금 세고라서.
And so the next section says of the two meditative techniques, analytical and formal analysis is as follows. And so the way that we sustain a meditation in relation to this view is we, first of all, use reasons or arguments and check whether the arguments that we use are admissible. Once we draw conclusions from the meaning of such rational analysis, we then attend the mind to the meaning of the conclusion in a placement meditation. So we start with an analytical meditation, then draw conclusion, then attend the mind in a stabilizing meditation to the conclusion.
대들 제금도 조금 수준이래. 직 투리지고는 때나 파발라 강사랑신이 춥나 본보다 원칙도 다데 강론도 좁고지 텔레비전도 좁다 매베 탁 제바티 내는 찌를 본소지 주 강나야 다치 세미트비치 대 담에 임바 팔 넘버 주지 지부 담에 세미트비치 다지 임바 팔 넘버 주비 수지 여발라 직단 타데 강론을 맨다비 수지 대니 강에 마임바 maybe 출응해 봐 차오 강사 당 본보랑 칭이 주비랑시 찍발라 리버 숨숨비 담보 다케랑바 되면도 타와니 담보랑 칭이 주비랑시 찍이나 텔로 또로 하유라 만초 안교데 랑 칭이 주번 하유 주비 로임비처 배나 년도 되버다게 빠져 템벌 총 원나원시 나유라 만초 안되번 총소스.
So reading through the section that explains of the two meditative techniques, analytical and formal analysis is as follows. That's the first one. In determining selflessness by means of the reasoning that things are free from existing truly or inherently, as one or distinct from the basis of designation. Were the person to exist inherently, it would have to exist invariably as one entity with the aggregates, the body and mind, or as a different entity to the body and mind. It definitely has no other mode of existence other than these two. This is because in general, whenever we prove that any phenomenon such as a vase has parts, the opposite, that it is partless, is refuted. Likewise, when we validly establish that a single object is partless, the opposite, that it has part, is refuted. As there is no way for something to exist apart from its being either the same or different from something else, we should be convinced that there is no other mode of existence than these two. So we, for the sake of this analytical meditation, we examine whether something is either one or different to the aggregates. The self in a truly existent self is one with the aggregates, so distinct from them. And so first off, we'll look at the consequence of the self being one with the aggregates. There are three reasons stated to counteract the assertion that the person and the aggregates are inherently one by way of their own characteristics. The first concerns the fallacies of asserting the self as such. If the self and the aggregates, the body and mind, were of one nature, existing by way of their own characteristics, the cognition to which they appeared an object would be undistorted. This is because it would be a consciousness to which inherent existence appeared as an object. This would be similar to the view of the followers of the hero traditions, the particularists or the Vaibhashika school, who assert that the sensory consciousness to which blue appears, which arises from a firm instinctive potency, is not distorted with regards to the object appearing to it.
This long session. Dize da pung ni ki tar tu bi dolu chidar yin batans. Te ni la topi toba la hansu tungo la. Dize na toba la te ni tadir na nama lobrin gyodi. Kong la hansu tang yul ni ki netsu tunshi. Yul ki netsu rangshin ki chubi rangshin chig yin bichir. Tedana deni yawa temi ki chigdun gyodi. Teni tongun tadudu nama zamya lobi chero. Tedanam pumbu tolen chibicher da kelenba tümedün gördü. Da pumbu namran zamdu sebichero. Teni mirik di zasheli nyevalenba madobi da yo mayin chibirsi. Nyevalenni da yini köki danı mebayin şi sonsuz.
In this context, if the self and the aggregates are of one nature, the final way in which the self and the aggregates exist must be consistent with the way in which they appear to conceptual thought. In that case, they could not appear as two different things because the way they appear to conceptuality and the way the two objects exist should be consistent, and the object's mode of existence is held to be of one nature in terms of inherent existence. If that was so, these two would be one without the slightest distinction. And from the point of view, even their appearing separately to thought would be impossible. Thus, since the aggregates are adopted at birth and discarded at death, to assert such a self would be meaningless because the self would be terminated as being merely a portion of the aggregates. This is untenable. And so, to so start in scripture, the fundamental treatise called Wisdom of Nagarjuna, the root of wisdom, says, there is no self apart from that designated upon the contaminated aggregates. If when they act as such, the contaminated aggregates themselves are the self, yourself would be non-existent after death.
Okay, Shashavan.
Shall we leave the text here for today?
Both collectors.
Sorry, just a second. Yeah.
The process of like gathering parts in order to make like a sense of a whole, and it and the process of the self or the labeling, because it's everywhere. It's external or phenomena, and it's internal as well within ourselves. This process of collection and then labeling and a sense of self. So my question is like, is it like a hidden phenomena, the process of collections and labeling? And is it a neutral function, this process? And
Is
can
it
a neutral function like
neutral-
gravity?
Neutral meaning not virtues, no non-virtues? Is that what you mean?
But we imbue it with our karma or our collections of causes and conditions, but the function itself of labeling a collection, is that like could that be like a neutral function like gravity? And
so
like
I'm just
lock.
kind of trying to I'm thinking of how to translate it to Geshe. So neutral meaning kind of like it occurs like a default or automatic mechanism, or do you mean neutral as not positive, not negative? It's just what it is.
The function, yeah, I suppose I am saying that. Yeah, but it can be imbued like with our collection, like with our karma and our cause and conditions that make it into something that can be allow us to be liberated, or allow us to be like that force us to bound within that condition.
The Koran labdan di pigeto la gyutu mane. The Geshe dodo di kareshigi di ngatso min ta di di chashila ten min tagirwa chizan chata chachen tewaina ngatso kansa dak tawo di la kansa dagi chashe dilatene ngao chi min chik tagirwa chizan min tatandi kogyurbes ngatso chizan kogyurese di Quran la di pesher ngatso 딱단디 하마 코나야 ngatso khande chiktagi yome di patagi years mataba masambadi tagirawas chesan min takpad sa di kopatsugi tagirves di chikche ani nibadi karresena tadi min Jatan tokpa ming takpa di dilayan soso le tan pacha tan sanlo tantan la tene yamana pacha tan le tan samlo gi wangi minda tagirwa sangen yagdu dire di marechik soso lela tene tan pacha tan so samlo tantan la tene tagirwas chesan dila taktu di soso la ma dewe tone tagirve siama soso le tan pacha la tene tagires
저다 민 딱수디 고규케 인사 맞다스 라 민 딱수디 간주 민 딱수 지고지야 베나 간주 나랜드 마스터 가든스 간주 따로 근데 진이 나랜드 마스터 가든 차오로 나랜드 마스터 가든 요츠디 간주래 꼭 줄바지 아도 민 딱수디 민 간주 따가 신고라 다가라 민 딱수 다가라레 모두 들로스키요 말이스 The me tinti ya di jas jatan bata leg to kita yungu yores. The leg korsi ondia the tamu shuji galan drogo da leg to the yungu yores. And 대한 꼴롱 또비 윤고레스.
And first off, with respect to whether this process of labeling is a hidden process, Geshe doesn't think that it's hidden. It's not hidden. Actually, it's quite clear how we label things. Like, for example, with the Nalanda Master Garden. So we've created a garden. We decided to call it the Nalanda Master Garden. So, the process of labeling is not something that is hidden. It's actually it's quite clear that, we created something and then we called it by name. Now, we label things by name. And is it affected? Are the names that we ascribe to things, the labels that we ascribe to things, are they affected by karma, imprints, and so forth? Well, certainly they are. They are affected by karma that we've accumulated before and such. And karma is very subtle. So our process of labeling is not only affected by karma, it's also affected by our motivation. So if you take the time to think through it, Geshe reckons that things will fall into place. All right, so let's leave it here for today. We're going to recite the dedication prayers. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chimrezik Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Savior of the soul-lane teachings and transmigrated beings who makes extremely clear the path that is unification of emptiness and compassion. To the lotus holder Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold this abused moral way who serves an abundant bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading my gymnastic doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please live long.